So I'm going to look at ceiling plans now, and ceilings as an object at the same time. So in Revit, make sure you realise that you have the ceiling tool, which obviously is used to create ceilings, but to work with those, usually we'll need to work with ceiling plans. And so you can see in the project browser that Revit will create ceiling plans for you automatically. And it's important that you realise they are reflected ceiling plans. I suppose technically a ceiling plan that isn't reflected is a thing, but I've never seen one in 20 years, and I don't really see why they would be necessary or useful, but reflected ceiling plans are extremely useful. And so I've opened up my ground floor ceiling plan. Remember, that's a reflected ceiling plan, so that means it's looking up. And we can actually see some things already because we've created a void in the floor that's above the ground floor. And so this is the void that's been cut out of the first floor, or the level 1 floor. So that tells you straight away that we're looking at a reflection of the floor plan, or sorry, we're looking up from the floor plan. That's maybe a better way of saying it. And to show you how this works, I'm going to go to a setting in the view properties called view range. So you can see over here on the left, I know that I've got the view properties because it says ceiling plan at the top. If there's an object selected, if I select the reference plane, then I have the properties for that object. If I select a wall, of course, I've got the properties for that. So usually to get the view properties up, you need to make sure that nothing's selected, and you'll see the type of view, which again is a ceiling plan. And now if I scroll down, you'll see this view property called view range, and all you need to do is click edit there. And then they've actually put a new feature into this version of Revit, which helps you understand how view range works, just by clicking on the show button there next to OK at the bottom. Pretty well, it's a diagram that explains how view range works. It doesn't change. It's just there to help explain it. And so it also helps to explain other types of views, like floor plans. So you can see there we've got this number 2, which is the cut plane. And that's something you might have come across in some of your other subjects. So do you know what the cut plane does? Exactly. Spot on. Spot on. Exactly. A floor plan is just a horizontal section, essentially. So it's cutting through at a particular height. In this case, you can see the height. It's fairly high. It's 2300. So do you know the height you'd normally use for a normal floor plan? Yep, that's not bad. Yeah, 1200 to 1500, depending on your window heights. But in Revit, the height varies, but I think it does start on 1200. But often you'll need to bring that up if you've got windows that are a little bit higher. So you can see here for a ceiling plan, it's set much higher, 2300. And so just to show you, here there's a door in the entry, which is obviously lower than 2300. So we can't see that door. But I'm going to change that. So the cut plane height there, you can see over here where it says offset. I'm going to change that to 1800. And then click apply. And now I can see the door. So you can adjust that cut plane height just as easily in a floor plan view. So for example, if you have a hopper or a high level window that's say 1800 off the ground, you'd need to raise your cut plane height so that you can see that in your floor plan. Then you've got the top, which of course sets what we can view in that top range or above the cut plane. So you can see it's set to the level above, and that's why we can see that floor. Now what we've got to remember, when you're working with a ceiling plan, the view depth is actually looking upwards as well. So I'm going to change the view depth and make it higher still. So I'll make it 2000, just an example, which is, again, above level 1. Again, I'm going to click apply. Yeah, it's the distance up. So when it's a floor plan, It's a bit confusing because view depth is down. But in a ceiling plan, it's up. So they use that same setting for up or down, depending on whether you're in a floor plan or a ceiling plan. But just to be confusing, top is always top, bottom is always bottom. That's the way it is with Revit. So I have to point out view depth, because if you work with the top, or if you adjust the top, you need to make sure that view depth is at least as high as that or higher. In a floor plan, it has to be below the bottom or lower. Or, sorry, the same height as the bottom or lower. But you can see with the ceiling plan, the bottom option is grayed out. You can't adjust that. And it's not necessary. But can you see here how now I can see the steps? So my staircase is above level 1. So that's being picked up in the view depth there and coming in with those dashed lines. Okay, so you need to understand view depth and view range so that you can work with ceiling plans, and particularly so that you can see things like ceilings, which are often going to be above the cut plane.
And it's showing that above 1.0 line.
Yeah, that's right. That's the view depth. That's right. So, yeah, that's it. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I'll click OK. And you'll find that if you make a ceiling level, which a lot of people do, then you'll often need to go and adjust that view range so that you can see things above that level. So now I can make a ceiling. And so I'll start with a simple one. In the room that I've defined over here, I'm going to click on the ceiling tool. No, we made floors and cut holes in them, but we didn't. Oh, maybe with some people, but yeah, I didn't go through it. Yeah. So, okay, so if I click on the ceiling tool.
Yes, but then you said that we will do it.
Oh, yeah, but I didn't do a demo on it. Yeah. I was supposed to add at the end as an extra thing. Yeah. So, okay, so here I'm going to click on the ceiling tool. And then you can see that it's picking up these rooms automatically. So that's the automatic ceiling option, which comes up straight away. And then you can see over in properties that it's set to the level, ground floor, and then we've got this height offset. So that's the distance from that ground floor level, working upwards. Yep, so 2600 is the starting height, but do you know what the minimum, well, what's the minimum for the BCA? Exactly, 2400. But then what's the more common minimum that's often required by councils these days? 27. 27. Yeah, that's right. Right, I think. Okay, so 2700. So I'll make it that. Yeah. It's not all councils, but a lot of them. Yeah. So it's also in one of these unit building controls as well, but that's a different thing. So yeah. So here, if we click onto the interior of that room, you can see it's picked up that with the red outline. So I can click. That's made a ceiling. Now I can't see it because it's a plain, plasterboard lined ceiling. So I'm going to finish that and then just get the section and move it. So if I go and then open that section, now I can see the ceiling. And yes, I did show this last week because I know we had high windows, and the ceiling there you can see is obviously covering over the window. We don't want that. So it's no problem here to just select that ceiling, and then either using the dimension here, can raise that to, let's say, 3200. That's still not high enough. So, oh yeah, well it's quite high, but this is a very high window. So, so there in properties, can adjust it the same way, and I'll raise it even higher to 3500. Now, that might seem like a lot of wasted space, but it's actually useful to have that space for services and other things. So it's not a bad idea to keep some space there between the ceiling and the floor. Yeah, if you're doing air conditioning, that can take up a lot of room, but even lighting and then plumbing in some cases.
So what's the ideal
Oh, it varies. It really varies. If you're doing air conditioning, then you need to talk to your mechanical engineer and work out the ducting, but I don't think you'd have fully ducted in this building, so then it depends on the planning and whether your drainage needs to go through the ceiling cavity, or if you have service ducts for your plumbing, then you won't need as much of that. So it depends on the design.
In compliance of your residential homes, is there a standard ceiling?
No. Again, depends on the planning. Yeah. So in some cases, again, the drainage needs to go through the ceiling. Often if it's badly planned and they have to work it out later and put in, you can tell because they have these horrible bulkheads going through living spaces. But if you keep the bathrooms on top of each other, stacked, you can have the drainage going straight down, and then you can avoid all of that stuff going through your ceiling. So again, depends on your planning. So 3,500 maybe will give me less of a, oh sorry, what did I say? 3,500, what I've just done. So let's say 3,800 or 3,900, or even 4 metres might be easily possible if all we have to do is put lighting in. And you can see there even would go closer. But again, it's going to depend on your design. So going back to the, again, ground floor ceiling plan, I'm going to make another ceiling. And this time, I'm not going to use the automatic ceiling option. So instead, we'll go to sketch ceiling. And so then you can see you get exactly the same tools as you have when you're making a floor or a roof. You've got all of the line and shape drawing tools, which are great of course, and then just like floors and roofs, you've got pick walls. So I'm going to pick the outside walls, just as I would making a floor. Notice I'm picking on the inside of those walls. It's important that you realise that generally ceilings are framed off the inside of your walls. And so it's different if they're part of the roof structure, but in this case they won't be. So again, keep your ceilings on the inside edge of your walls. And then, just like a floor or a roof, I've got to trim the corners to make that a closed shape. And then for this shaft area, where we've got the stair, there are no walls to pick. So I need to use either one of the line drawing tools, or you might remember that you've got the pick line tool.
So it's actually, it's only flooring that's bad, so there's no walls.
Yeah, no, actually that shaft will cut through that as well, but I don't want to go and adjust it, so I just want to show you how to draw shapes at the moment, but yeah, shafts will cut it later, you'll see. Yeah. So again, there with the line tool, I could of course draw lines manually, but if you remember, the pick lines tool is great if you've got something that you've drawn already that you just want to pick. We can pick those edges really easily using that tool. So you can create any shape you need for your ceilings, and then again, just check your height. So it's really just a factor of the profile or the outline that you've drawn, and then the shape. So here again, also the height I mean, so here again you've got the level being the ground floor. It's offset from there, 2,700 at the moment, so we'll bring that up to at least 3,500, probably much higher later. In fact, sorry, I will take that up to 3,900. And that's not a standard height, it's just that I know it's closer to the floor we've got. Then I'll finish it. And you can see I've obviously forgotten to trim one of the lines, and it's fine when you see this message. Let's give you a tip there. If you're not sure where your problem is, use that show option, and it shows you where the issue is. In this case, it's had to zoom out to show me, but here we can see it's in that corner there. Okay, so again, tick to finish. And if we go to the section now, we'll of course see that new ceiling. And we've got a big gap there. So again, oh no, that's just the gap that we've ended up with between the floor and the ceiling because of the heights. So we could maybe bring that even higher. So make it maybe 4,300. That's too close, so I'll take it down to 4,000, nice round number. Or 4,200, that's a bit too much. Okay, I may need more room for services later, but just for now that looks okay. So what do you think you then have to do to cover up that gap? So this is an important thing for interiors. You often have to think about this as part of your design. Yeah. So you've got to put an edge over that to cover it. So it's actually called a fascia, even though it's on a floor. A fascia. So it's a floor fascia, and so that would cover up the edge there. So that's something you'd need to put in as part of your design. But for the time being, you can just fill in the gap by making the ceiling deeper. So that's the final thing I'll show you, how to adjust this ceiling. So I'm going to measure that distance. But have a look around when you see in shopping centres and, well, even in residential, but definitely in shopping centres, you'll see this all the time. They put a lot of time into thinking about the treatment for that edge because those are often exposed in the voids and the other things you've got in shopping centres. Oh, no, it's simple. They've got a tool for it. So they've got floor fascias. They call them floor slab edges is the tool, but that can be used to create floor fascias, yeah. So again here, my distance now from the bottom of the ceiling to the bottom of the floor is 135. That may change, but for now that's what I'll work with. So I'll select the ceiling, and then this is hopefully just reinforcing things we've already done. Just like with walls, floors and roofs, you go to Edit Type, and I could duplicate, but I'm not going to because I don't have any other ceilings. So I don't have to duplicate to make a new one. I can just modify the one that I already have. So I'm just going to click Edit, and then I might round this off to 10. Super Seal is 10 mil anyway, I think, isn't it, colleagues? So I know 12 mil is what plasterboard is generally, but for ceilings, there's a product called Super Seal, which CSR make, that I'm pretty sure is 10 mil. So, Super Seal, is it? Oh, oh okay. Okay. So yeah. Well, I'll just round it off to 10. Yeah, that's. I know you can get 10 mil Super Seal. So yeah. So yeah, because I just use some. So then if we use the thickness there, so I want 135 altogether. I've got 10 mil on the bottom, and then 125 is the difference. So altogether now it's 135. So clicking OK, and then there we are. So I've covered up the gap, but we're still going to see a line between those two objects. So later again, you definitely want to try and resolve that. Oh, well, we're going to just assume that that's all incorporated. You won't need to show that detail in your designs as long as you've allowed room for it. So if you were to bring the ceiling down, then you just make the ceiling even thicker. Or show a gap if you want to. It's up to you. But again, we're not doing construction here. Sorry? Oh, you have to put the facial on probably anyway. But again, it's important to think about the sort of drawings we're trying to create. We're not trying to create construction drawings. We're trying to create presentation drawings in BizCom. So again, here using the finish off join tool, I can now choose the ceiling and the floor, and those two things now read as one. Oh, the join tool. I'll just undo that and show you again. So with join, I can choose the ceiling and the floor, and there we go. Now, don't worry about that heavy line weight. That's a setting you can adjust. That's just a line weight setting. But otherwise, you can see it now reads cleanly with an object, and for presentation drawings, that's the most important thing. You don't need to show all of the services. In fact, it's a really terrible idea to do that at this stage. It's going to totally detract from your drawings if you try to show those things. Okay, so maybe we'll give you some time to make some ceilings, and then we can have a look at lighting straight after that.
I'm sorry, can I ask you a
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
question?
Oh, this is just a different example. So that one there, that will be brought up as well.
So which
Or,
one do you want us to do?
oh, whichever you need. So this is just existing. It's all going to be demolished.
One's the floor of the level above. No, yeah, I know that, but like, so the one on the left leaves gaps for services, the one on the right, you
Oh, that one I just haven't fixed. So, okay, so I'll show you this. Okay, so say we wanted to have two different ceiling heights. Again, for presentation drawings, maybe you don't need to show that cavity. So I'll measure the distance from the bottom of this ceiling to the bottom of the floor, and you can see it's 435. So if I select this other ceiling, I need to make that a different thickness. So again, I'll go to Edit Type. This time I will duplicate, because if I change that one called Plane, it's going to change my other ceiling. So I've duplicated it, and we'll call this Plane 435. And then clicking Edit there, again, I can just change this. So in total, it's 435. So 425 is the thickness of the stud layer there, which is going to include the cavity as well. Okay, and that just fills in the gap. Yeah, and then I can join them as well just to clean up the graphics. Now just remember, even though we're doing a lot of the work here in Revit, you should also be thinking about using other presentation tools as part of Viscom and also your design subjects. So InDesign and Photoshop are probably going to be important tools for cleaning up the graphics even further. But again, so you can see there we've got fairly clean ceilings and floors.
So we don't need to join them, right, in the end? Do
So,
we have a policy to join the floor ceilings in the
well, it's up to you, but at some point you would need to clean up the graphics. Again, it's not a good idea to show those ceiling voids in presentation drawings. It's going to take away from what you're trying to show from the design. So, so again, it's much better to show cleanly in this way, whether you do it in Revit or take it into Photoshop or InDesign or whatever tool you're using, if any of you know Illustrator. That's what you'd be doing mostly for student projects, and trying not to show any of that detail that's really services and not what you do for interiors.
Is there a different thickness to the flooring and the ceiling? Because we need to understand
The flooring?
yeah, I mean line thickness.
Oh, the line weights. Yeah, so that's all set automatically by Revit. If you're interested, I will show you where that lives, but you can just use the default settings usually. It's on the Manage tab, and then you can go to Additional Settings, and then you'll see line weights. You should have a look at it, yeah, but maybe at first you don't need to. But yeah, it's good to start thinking about this. It's an extra thing. It's not really what I want to do with ceilings, but yeah, it doesn't hurt to look at it. So again, under Additional Settings, you can go to line weights first, just to get an understanding of the settings. I think they're far too heavy, the initial settings, but for the work you're doing, they're fine. So you can see there, they vary according to the scale, and that's a really important thing. So for details, and I always wonder with these, technically they're larger scale drawings, but I know sometimes they'll be called smaller scale. So things that are showing smaller things, in other words, 1 to 10, for example, they use heavier line weights, and then drawings going up in scale to say 1 to 200, you'll see they use much lighter line weights. It makes perfect sense, because on a drawing like a site plan, for example, you'll have much a greater number of lines, and they'll be closer together. So the line weights can't be as heavy, or they'll start to read as one. They'll blur in together. On a detail, you have fewer lines and they're further apart, and so you can have heavier line weights, and it makes the drawing easier to read. So that's the basic principle.
On one plan, so for example this plan, do you use different? Do they use different line weights? Say to do a window or to do a floor?
Yes, but it's more to do with whether things are cut or in projection. So here you can see the things that are heavy are the floors and the walls, because they're being cut in this section, but the windows would be lighter because they're behind the cut plane or in projection. Yeah. So then you can see these numbers generally ascend. So from number 1, which is the lightest, to number 16, which is never used. That's far too heavy. Whoever does a 9mm line? No one.
So this is like on Revit, it's automatically.
Yeah, it is all set for you. Yeah, yeah. So these are the pens, but then to adjust the line weights, you've got object styles. And so notice how The floors, if we go down, floors there are 1, which is the lightest in projection, but they're 4 when they're being cut.
So you can make your own adjustments.
Of course.
Depending on how you
That's
want
right.
to
That's
draw
right.
it.
Yeah.
But it's different in AutoCAD. It's not
In AutoCAD, you have to set it all manually.
manually, yeah.
Yeah.
So this one-
So you need to understand a lot more when you're using AutoCAD, and I think that's a good thing. I think Revit does a bit too much for people at first, and they don't, unless they put the effort in, don't get the understanding until much later. Usually not until 3rd year. Okay, guys, can you stop talking? Okay, so that's an important thing, and that's why you taught AutoCAD still in this course, and some other courses they don't teach it, but that's not a good thing. So here you can see why the ceilings looked a little bit different. Notice how they're, again, 1 in projection, but they're 3 when they're cut. So I'll change it to 4 instead, and now looks the same as the floor.
If you changed it for one for this time, if you go out and then open a new file, does it automatically go back
No.
to 3?
No, it's only for this file.
It's only for this one, so
Yeah.
we'll change it.
Yeah, that's right. But you can create your own template and then start with those settings. Yeah, and that's something to look at. But I like to use the settings out of the box. I think a lot of people rely on templates far too much, templates that usually other people have made, and then again don't understand these settings, and often those templates that other people have made maybe don't have the best settings anyway. So again, I really think it's important when you're teaching or just when you're doing these courses to look at the settings you get out of the box and understand how to adjust things on your own. So again, that's more than enough for ceilings. Probably a bit further than we need to go to, but it's good to think about line weights if you're curious about that. That's really good. And I'll finish that. What's going on there?